So, hi everyone, my name's Rob Gronbeck and I'm here with Dr. Stephen Bird to discuss his awesome new book, which is coming out called When Winning Matters. He's co-authored this with Rob Beveridge. These guys are two leaders in professional sports. I've gotten to know you, Birdy, over the past couple of years, and I've truly appreciated what you contribute to help athletes and professionals stay healthy, be ready to compete when they need to. And I'm super excited to get to talk about some of those one percenters, that chapter 7, because if you guys don't know, I did start a podcast called The One Percenters, not the one placenters. That's something else.
The one percenters that count. What are the odds that that's the chapter in the book, and that was the name of your podcast? But just to let's go back to move forward. Rob, appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. As you mentioned, we actually, 2015, I think, when we first sat down at the university there in Cairns and had a coffee, I would believe, and talk shop. And right then it was very obvious, your passion for your field, your thirst of knowledge, and I think those two things sort of drew us together pretty much straight away. And even though we're now in different states, we continue to stay in touch. So look forward to just generally talking shop about the book, and more specifically about the chapter that we've deemed the one percenters that count, and then sort of looking at how we can potentially unpack some of the science that's in that. But more really, it's about what can we provide the listeners that are practical examples that they can start to implement in their everyday lives. So look forward to talking shop.
Yeah, man, I love that you bring on the science. You're a researcher, you're a published academic, you're also in the field, and so there's that beautiful balance between being a scientist and a practitioner. So you're not just in the lab and just pumping out research that maybe is not reaching people, or that you're not using it. So I love that you have that balance between being a practitioner, working with Olympic, was it Philippines or Indonesia?
Indonesia. Yeah, right.
Indonesia.
So the badminton team in Indonesia, we've been fortunate to do some work with those guys, which has been great.
And I was most impressed by your work with Penrith.
So we were able to spend a year with the Penrith Panthers in the NRL, going back a few years now. That I think it was 2012, 13, thereabouts. And the beauty of that, and we'll touch on that in a little while, but not to go too far forward, but we were really fortunate to work with a very forward-thinking strength conditioning coach and performance scientist, Matt Ryan, at the Panthers that year, who was really looking to revamp their fatigue monitoring and recovery management process. And Matt really was trying to look at that as a whole holistic approach with a process, not just one or two things that this is what everyone else is doing. And so once again, like yourself, that sort of instantly drew me to look at what Matt really was trying to achieve there. And we'll touch on that in a little while.
Yeah, just wanted to let everyone know who is watching that you have got tons of runs on the board. Some of the graphs that I've seen where you're teaching, again, I'm jumping forward, but working with the Townsville Crocs, and what you were able to do to figure out what people could do to be more fresh and energetic and vibrant after their game, so that they could hit training harder the next week. We'll get to all the detailed stuff. You've talked previously about the one percenters, and it's one of the aspects in the book. Did you want to discuss first how the book came about and what the purpose is of you and Rob, and even how you guys met in your working relationship? And then maybe we'll get into the more detailed.
Yeah, that sounds great. And it's a really unique story. Once again, are you, and I challenge the listeners and the viewers, do you view the cup half full or half empty? How do you view that? Now, the reason I start with that statement is in the lead up to how I actually met Rob Beveridge. So we had just finished the year with the Penrith Panthers and working with those guys, revamping their program under Matt Ryan, and we had some success in that now there was a series of procedures and processes in place where, as you know, if there's not a process for accountability in a process or a procedural framework, it's very hard to see where things may not be working optimally. And at the end of that year, we were successful in obtaining some further research money and a research grant. And unfortunately, at that point in time, I was transitioning out of the Panthers. We had this research opportunity. I arrived in Perth thanks to a good friend who was the former head of performance at the Western Region Academy of Sport for some time. He had just taken on the role, Brett Coxedge had just taken on the role with Basketball WA with their high performance program. And he contacted me and was very keen for my involvement to help assist with their National Intensive Junior program. I arrived in Perth to help set up the logistics for that program from a physical development and athletic preparation point of view. And I said, look, is there anybody you know at some of the AFL teams? We have this research funding. This is the line of research we'd like to do. Who would you suggest I speak to potentially at some of the AFL teams in Perth? And unknown to myself, Brent was one of Bevo's former assistant coaches in the NBL at the Sydney Spirit or the Razorbacks a few years prior. And he said, look, no disrespect to AFL, but I'm going to introduce you to Rob Beveridge. And I'm sure that knowing Bevo and having worked for him and knowing you and working with you, I think you two guys are really going to hit it off. So unbeknown to a lot of people, Bevo actually has a sports science degree in his repertoire. So we had dinner, Bevo and I talked shop, and this is how fast, when you have an organisation that is prepared to invest in staff and people that match their core values, things happen very quickly. So my point being that we met with Bevo, we had dinner, we discussed potentially a position of research and innovation within the Perth Wildcats organisation that they had not had previously. They had a brand new strength and conditioning coach, and once again, the progressive nature of the Perth Wildcats. They were the first team in the National Basketball League to employ a full-time strength and conditioning coach in Will Markwick. So Bevo was really keen to see, can we help mentor that particular coach, Will, who's gone on to some great things, and potentially look at this research innovation part for them. And within 48 hours, we had a signed contract. So that's when, and that goes back to the organisational structure within the group. Bevo was very keen on pulling in people where he felt could add value to the program. And then the board and the ownership group were very keen to try and maximise the potential of the group by investing in those type of staff. So that's how actually I came about to meet Bevo, and that was 2012, 13, thereabouts. I was able to work with him in that program full-time for a year, and then the next year assisting Will. So Will then went on to do a Masters of Sports Science at Edith Cowan University, and I was one of his co-supervisors in that project, working in basketball. Then I ended up in Cairns, and Bevo once again was like seeing whether I could potentially work with the Cairns Taipans. And unfortunately that didn't play out. They were aligned to another university. And then Bevo his former assistant coach, Sean Dennis, was actually the head coach of the Townsville Crocodiles. And once again, Bevo made the introduction, and within 24 hours, they had decided that the Crocs would like to employ our services and work through a part of that partnership. So went through that. Bevo went on then to coach the Illawarra Hawks in the National Basketball League for 4 years or so. And then when my time finished with the Townsville Crocodiles, unfortunately, they decided not to renew their license in the league after that year. I then ended up working with Bevo remotely at the start with the Illawarra Hawks. And then when I transitioned back to Sydney after finishing up my time in Cairns, working more one-on-one with some of the players and behind the scenes with some staff mentoring. So I have this long relationship with Bevo. And then throughout that time, Bevo and I have always discussed, when we read and we research, some areas that we really feel are missing that are so practical and relevant to coaches and people. And one day, you know, I openly said to Bevo, we really should put our thoughts down and write a book. And as it turned out, if we fast forward to now, the COVID situation had presented, And we really wanted to look at what can we do that's really impactful during the COVID situation to help coaches and to help people. And we thought that's the perfect time for us to sit down and put our thoughts into words and then write the book and publish it. So the book, When Winning Matters, Lessons Learned from Sports Elite, it'll be released on the 1st of September. So it's in the final pre-release stage. Any of the listeners can jump onto the When Winning Matters Facebook page. We have a large community, nearly 2,500 members in our group. So we certainly we're very proud of the book, but more importantly, we've sent it out for pre-reads with a lot of our peers, and the feedback has been really, really welcomed with what everyone has been saying. So look, quite a long-winded answer to say when I first met Bevo, but we have certainly a long history.
I think it's important to know. I think you highlight how quickly things can happen when you find people that are like-minded and share some similar interests and goals, the desire for improvement, the desire for innovation, and just to sit down with people and like, yeah, there's an element of luck involved as well. But if you're passionate and you work hard, people see that and they see it in themselves, they see it in others, and it's very easy. I think they call it the speed of trust. When you trust someone, I know that things happen quickly.
Hey, look, and I would call it the law of attraction, not the speed of trust. I would say it's the law of attraction. And when you give out certain energy, when you behave a certain way, when you hold yourself to a certain level of standard, I think you attract those type of people into your life. And luck. Look, luck is the result of dedication and hard work. Yes, there is an opportunity that needs to present. However, every single day we are presented with opportunities. It just depends on whether I want to explore those opportunities or whether I'm going to close the door on those opportunities. And I think that's it. It's the law of attraction. And Conor McGregor, the two-time world champion for the UFC, really speaks in detail about the law of attraction and his use of one of the topics we'll talk about, and that being visualization, specifically in remaining in the moment. And he's very, one of the few athletes that have really openly come out and spoken about the law of attraction and the impact that visualization has had on him. And he's, he talks about the see it, believe it, achieve it scenario, but it's the actions and the actionable steps that you must put in place to fulfill that visualization that you have as to where you want to go and what you want to achieve. So, and I think that's the law of attraction.
You were at the documentary when Olympic champion Lydia Lasilla came to Cairns, and her documentary, The Will to Fly. Guys, if you haven't seen it, you've still got it. You've got to see it. It's hair raising. It's goosebump raising. And to get to meet the woman and sit down and have lunch with her and learn from her was incredible, and ask her questions, and her use of looking at her future self, and her coach, Jeffrey Hodges from the Sports Mind Institute, one of my first mentors, said that Lydia, there are all these different future selves, but which one do you there's 100 of them all lined up in a row, all the different ways it could go, but which one do you want? Which one do you want to have happen? It's like, she could almost point at it and go, that me. All right, we'll take that me and make it big and make it bright, and even step into that future you and feel how it would feel and think how she thinks, and start to even to have conversations with that future self and go, what do I need to do? How do I need to do? And Birdy, when I talk to my future self, all he ever says is keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Absolutely. And I think
keep going. So I don't even need to talk to him anymore, but he just says the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that really resonates to me, and if we stay with Lydia for a moment, the impact that she had not only on you, on myself, but I have three girls, 16-year-old, 13-year-old, 12-year-old. They were, it's just probably 4 years ago now, I guess, thereabouts maybe, but the time that she made and took out of her moments when she was busy just to sit with the girls and have a chat to them, like those moments are everlasting. So I think they're quite important. But once again, if I just revert back to Conor McGregor just very quickly, in a lot of his interviews after he became the first dual belt champion in the UFC, everyone said, "Oh, look, he just seemed to have, taken it in a stride." And his response was, "That's because this feels very comfortable. This feels very familiar. Okay, this is where I'm meant to be." It was though everything that he had, the actionable steps that he had put into place in order to make that visualization a reality, was very, very familiar to him. And I think that's one of the keys and if you move into mindfulness and visualization, the repetitive practice, 6 minutes a day, 1,440 minutes in a day. I'm looking at, 0.42% of my time just to give me some me time to allow myself to engage in some mindfulness activities. And when you make that a part of your day, as Conor McGregor has said, it just provides this level of clarity, and it's very, very familiar with what you're trying to do. So I think they're really important lessons. And I don't want to give anything away with the documentary about what we had seen with Lasada, but everyone needs to watch it. That's, bottom line.
Absolutely. So visualization is one of those key 1%ers, and I guess that assumes that there are these 1%ers, but what's the 95%ers? Like, what are the basic things that we also need to be doing? Like, we need to find a good coach. We need to be part of a good program. We need to be dialing in our diet and training right. So they're all the kind of the things that everyone already knows. Kind of, and of course you can optimize them. Why would you say that these, and you've said it yourself, it's kind of bizarre or interesting, and you said I'd love it, and I do, that a lot of those 1%ers are mental. Why do you think it's like mental and, and I'm jumping ahead now, but that it's these 1%ers are more recovery and mental or psychological? Is that because people aren't doing them and that's why they are the advantage givers?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really good question. And if I just once again go back, and I was fortunate enough to spend a few months at the Melbourne Storm a few years ago with some research projects we were doing, and I just want to revert back to a particular statement by Craig Bellamy, who's arguably one of the better coaches in the NRL, given his record. And he goes on to state that every year they would go and look at other sporting teams to see what they do. How do they manage their players? What training do they do? And he became to the realization that every team, lifts weights. Every team does some type of conditioning work. Every team watches film. Every team does all these things collectively similar. So what is it that the better teams do? And he made reference to AC Milan, specifically pointing them out, going, AC Milan is very much known for keeping their players fresh and healthy. Not only healthy, but happy. And they do that through a variety of physiological and psychological recovery type strategies. Because he says doing all the small things, so these 1%ers that we're going to talk about, doing all these small things right is one reason you succeed. And he goes on to then say, because all these 1%ers add up. The small things add up. And if you look at the 1%ers in our book, we talk about 7, the magnificent 7. And as you were alluding to, and we discussed this the other day, of our 7, 5 of the 7 key 1%ers that we've identified in elite sport athletes that are significant game changers, 5 of the 7 are based on psychological strategies. So let's look at those. The first 5, goal setting, first and foremost. Visualization, we've touched on really briefly. Achieving highest self or future self. Cognitive anchoring as a technique to remain present in the moments that matter. Utilizing mindfulness to help you achieve performance flow. So for us, I'm preaching the converted here, they're 5 things. So out of the 7 areas that Rob Beveridge and I looked at in relation to elite athletes, and what do those athletes tell us are the defining difference for them. Out of the top 7, 5 are psychological strategies. And I can see you've got a smile on your face now. So I'll let you add into that.
Always. No, Yeah, smile. The smile on my dial says it all. So yeah, I love that Bellamy went and had a look, and yeah, that's the 95%. Everyone's doing this. Although I recall a story, a little bit off track, but I recall a story of perhaps the Russian ice hockey were weight training, and possibly the Canadians mocked them until the Russians mopped the floor with them because they were bigger, stronger, faster. So once someone starts something, whether it's altitude training or foam rolling or GPS, eventually there'll be everyone else will catch up. And so now we've got, so it's really finding out what's something that others aren't doing, most people aren't doing, and some people are doing that's significantly making a difference, because they might all be singing Kumbaya. There might be one team that's singing Kumbaya and they're doing well, but is that really the difference? Maybe some group cohesion and some singing, maybe. But what are the things that they're doing differently but are also potent? And I think that's where your scientific mind and approach really helps, just to disentangle the kind of the rituals versus and then the myths versus actually something that's actually going to be useful.
Yeah, and I think if we just go back to, so I said there were 7. Remiss of me. Number 6 is just physiological and psychological recovery. So we have a recovery checklist which we can touch on, and of course the last one in that list, although by no means last, is obviously sleep, and we look at everything around sleep hygiene. But if I can just go back to the 5, we said goal setting, visualization, achieving higher self or future self, cognitive anchoring, mindfulness to help with performance flow. There's one reoccurring theme across all of those psychological elements, and that is they are all aimed at trying to reduce an athlete's reactivity to situations. So your negative reactiveness to a situation. Now, the better the athlete in relation to controlling their negative responses or their negative reactiveness, those athletes generally possess a greater ability to remain calmer in the moments that matter. And it's at that point when decision making is optimal, or conversely, it's going to be suboptimal if I allow my negative responses to take me away. And we've all seen it, Rob. We've all seen players that have been put off their game or not playing to the standard they want to play, because and we call it the inner critic. They all have this little inner critic talking on their side, all right? And the athletes that have better ability to reduce the noise from that inner critic, to not allow the negative reactiveness to the situation, are the athletes that are better. And the examples that you look at, any example, and a wonderful documentary, The Last Dance, we've all watched it and listened to parts of it. And you would often see Michael Jordan purposely putting it on to the other guys on the floor, verbally, physically, banging bodies hard, getting in their ear, because he was trying to see which one of those athletes would break, i.e., which one of those athletes would respond negatively to the emotional stress that he was trying to place on them. He was trying to determine in that moment when the last shot has to be put up, if Michael's triple teamed, who is the bloke that he wants to give the ball to? Because he knows that's the guy who can reduce the noise, can control the negative emotional responsiveness, and actually get the shot up. So I think that's the clear thread that joins all of those things together. And I think that's a really important point to make to the listeners, that any strategies that we can employ that help the athlete remain present in the moment is going to help them be able to complete their task to the best of their ability, whether that's a sport, whether that's in high pressure business, whether it's with your schoolwork. Those are the things that really make a difference. And I think we've looked at a lot of literature on that. And the one part of the literature that really surprised me, Rob, was just simplistic goal setting. The fact that, only 3% of adults actually write down their goals. Something as simple as just writing your goals down. Only 3% of adults do it. I was really, that was out of everything we've researched so far, that was probably the most surprising thing. In an athletic setting, we always talk to athletes and go, do you have goals written down? And they all go, yep. Righto, so can you produce them for me? Oh, well, hang on. And then they start to write them down then. But the key is not only writing down the goals, that's the first thing. You know, just by writing them down, I'm about 43% more likely to achieve them. But writing them down is one thing. Then what I need to do is write down my goals and then write actionable steps that's going to help me modify or change what I need to do today that is going to place me on a better path to achieve those goals. So now I add some actionable steps. Now I've gone from 43% more likely to achieve to 62% more likely to achieve. Then I'm going to take those actionable steps. So I'm going to write down my goals. I'm going to write down actionable steps. I'm then going to verbalize those to somebody else. Now I'm bringing in the accountability factor. Now, once I've done that, I've gone and written down my goals. I've compiled some actionable steps. I've verbalized to you my accountability. This is what I'm going to achieve. Now I'm going to check in with you every other week and tell you how I'm going. That's the fourth thing. Now I'm 76% more likely to achieve my goals. But that all starts with just writing them down, first and foremost. So I'll leave you to ponder on that for a second.
Yeah, well, we went into negative reactiveness, and talking about the inner critic, and it made me think about having an inner cheerleader. But sometimes it can be just as good to have no mind. That state where you're aware of your body, you're aware of your outside, and there's just not a lot of chatter going on the inside. Speaking of Michael Jordan, he did talk about his the basketball court was his sanctuary, where he could just gain a relief from the rest of his life, and he could just shut everything out.
And that's what the good hoopers do. The good hoopers will say that. The good hoopers will say that that is the one environment that they feel most comfortable. And that's not just hoopers. That's most elite sports people will say, oh man, you're ready. And if I go back to the combat sports, to fighters, and you say, oh, the hardest part about fighting is the training. The easy part is the actual fight. Or if you say to rugby league players, oh, how hard was that game? Well, the hardest part about the sport is the training. The easy part is actually the competing, because that's the environment that makes them feel familiar, which we already spoke about with Conor McGregor. And when they feel familiar, they have a tendency to feel relaxed. So therefore they can do what they do. Now it's the situational changes within a game or a competition that causes that emotional negative reactivity to that dial to shift. So, but I think it's about how comfortable can you feel in that environment. And you speak about, this inner peace that we're trying to find. For us, that's really to try and allow the athletes to have a very high sense of clarity. If they have a very high sense of clarity, they're more relaxed with the situation because they know exactly what needs to happen. And, it's the fear of the unknown, right? So that's one thing we would look at.
Yeah, it reminds me of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and flow, and talking about some of one of the key conditions for flow is having a clear goal. A clear goal. If you know what it is, you can focus on it. And then if you get regular and pretty immediate feedback, you can now figure out, am I getting closer towards it or am I getting further away? And I might be getting closer to it. But if I've got some inner critic that's distracting me, I might not even see that I'm getting closer. So I think we all want a bit more flow and a little bit less low, as I like to say. And a lot of the things that you talked about in terms of the Magnificent Seven, I saw a lot of them being offline, as in things you would practice off the field. But there's a couple of them that you would practice on the field or in the heat of the battle. Did you want to touch on the difference? And in particular, I think your cognitive anchoring was one of those
we'll certainly touch on that. Yeah, absolutely. And that's been something we've been able to,
because I love that,
do across a variety of sports. And we just backtrack track for a second. So Bevo talks about what you're referring to as conscious commitments. All right. So these are my conscious commitments, what we're going to do. And with selecting goals, what I'm not saying is I'm going to write a list of 50, right? What we're saying is we're going to select 2 or 3 primary goals that I can put some actionable steps to. And if we put that in the sports environment, when we were able to, Jodie McGuire was the performance psychologist that we're working with at the Perth Wildcats, and she was really big on these conscious commitments. So the players would come into the change room and we would have a big laminated poster. There would be the player picture and they would write their 2 conscious commitments for the game. Everyone could see it. So now they've got their 2 conscious commitments written on the poster. All their teammates can see it. Now they're instantly accountable to them. And then they would write a couple of keywords that would anchor them to that conscious commitment. So if I'm on the bench, I'm not saying, hey, you said you were going to box out and get the boards, but his keyword was contact in paint. Boom, I want to make contact to get me this best position so now I can get the board, right? So Jodie McGuire, I've got to give a shout out to her. She was very instrumental in the conscious commitments component that we were able to align, because don't forget, athletes are a different mentality, man. They're a different breed. So we need to find ways to link and anchor them to the moment. That's important to who? Not to me, but important to them. So the terminology and the vocabulary that we're going to use with the athletes is going to be meaningful words to them. And so I know Jodie worked a lot on establishing our keyword recognition keywords for each individual athlete. So just a little segue on that conscious commitments and how we would do that. But if we go to the cognitive anchoring, we've used cognitive anchoring a lot. I really want to shout out to Aidan Parsons, executive Keystone Coaching. He's a guy that we used at the Townsville Crocodiles, and he was the guy that was really big on transitioning athletes from future self. So we've talked about how do we obtain my future self, but his version was more about highest self. So what's the highest version of myself? If we go back to Kobe Bryant, Kobe would always talk about every day. Monday, my goal, to get better at one thing. Tuesday, my goal, to get better at one thing. Wednesday, my goal, okay, you see where I'm going with this. And at the end of the week, he's gone, at the end of the week, have I produced a better version of myself than at the beginning of the week? So this whole thing around your highest self and trying to improve or obtain your highest self day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out. And the best way to do that is to learn from your mistakes. Mistakes are inevitable. None of us are 100% perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. The athletes we work with are not perfect. But it's learning from those things. And Kobe gives another really good example. First year out in the NBA, shooting air balls. Everyone's, obviously giving him some lip about that. And he's like, okay, got to take that on board. So why am I shooting air balls? Oh, man, during the game, I just don't have the legs. My legs aren't under me to get the shot. But that's something I can work on. So next year, I'm going to have a strength training program that's going to make sure that I have my legs under me. No problem, tick. I'm going to do that. So it's not about looking at the errors and then folding and caving into that inner critic because I've made mistakes. And that would then lead me to think that that type of athlete has a closed mindset, not a growth mindset. All right. And that's a whole nother story in itself. But Kobe's thing was right. Okay. I've got to get stronger. Last year in college, I played last year in high school, I come off, 30 games. Now I'm going into an 82 game season. In the back end of that season, I need to train differently so my legs are still under me. So we need to look at how we use those mistakes reflectively to help us obtain this highest self. But if we get on to cognitive anchoring, and with this cognitive anchoring, so Aidan was one of the people that first spoke to me in detail about, I've read about this concept and I was really keen to look at how can we apply this to the athletes that we're dealing with. And when you look at cognitive anchoring, it's really about the here and now, remaining present. And every one of us goes, okay, that seems simple enough. But under the heat of the battle, under the bright lights, okay, the emotions change based on every sequence of events that we go through on, and in this sport, I'm talking about basketball on court, those negative reactiveness to that situation can compound. And we've all seen that snowball effect of one error compounding another error. And for me, obviously I have a passion for rugby league, and you watch rugby league and you see a player throw a bad pass to a person, 9 times out of 10, the next pass from that person in the chain is also going to be a bad pass, right? So you see this one error compounded with another error and another error. So how do we try and reduce the impact of those type of errors? So we look at cognitive anchoring as one of the techniques that we've used to try and do that, to bring the player back to what we call a term called play present. How do I play present right now? And one of the keys for playing present right now, and if you look at Steve Kerr and Kevin Durant, with two, the basketball coach of the Golden State Warriors, and obviously KD, who's now with Brooklyn, they talk about one of the things they had to try and overcome early in their career was overthinking. And that overthinking negatively affected their ability to perform. And the example I'll give you is when I was working with the Illawarra Hawks with Bevo, we had a player, a point guard, 2-time grand final MVP, whose free throw shooting ability was not where you thought it would be for such a high level player. And anyway, so we spoke to him, and he was one of those guys who would overthink, all right? Always a play in front, trying to get to the next play. So when he was, he would drive to the hoop, get fouled, but he wanted to get off the free throw line what appeared to be as quick as possible. Didn't want to be there. I'm just going to put up my shots. So we challenged him through some cognitive anchoring. I want you to stay on the free throw line for 3 more seconds. That's all I want. Give me 3 more seconds on there. Let's go back to Conor McGregor. The familiarity. This feels comfortable. Come forward now. So we're going to say, okay, I'm going to give you a couple of tasks to cognitive anchor here and now. Our first task is fixated gazing. So I want you to do a fixated gaze on a point. And for this guy, he would fixate on the top right-hand corner of the backboard, just literally for 1 second. During that time, close his eyes. Give me 1 really deep breath. All right. Now, trying to get rid of some of this sympathetic drive going on. I want to get a bit of parasympathetic coming in, slow me down. Open my eyes. Now I need you to reconnect to earth right now. So he'd open his eyes, there need to be a quick tap of his toe or his foot, whatever it might be. It might be that I just have a quick glance to the keyword on my wristband. That whole sequence of events is like 5 seconds in total. Boom. Now you'll start and go through your free throw shooting routine. But we've anchored him now to this present moment in time. Not thinking about what just happened. I'm not thinking about what's ahead. They call it the present because it's a gift. Man, I'm going to stay here right now. That particular player, his free throw shooting percentage in the back end of the season increased by 37%. 37% increase.
Say it again, Stephen. Say it again.
37%, man. Right? I'm like, so now this player is now a 90% plus free throw shooter, which is where he should be.
And how many points per game is that adding?
Well, for this guy, he was a beast, right? Yeah. He was very fast. He was aggressive. He was a driver. So he was getting put on the stripe a lot, right? So, and at times in those closing minutes of a game or the closing seconds of a game, the other team would always look to foul him thinking, oh, he's just going to jack up some. No, second half of the season, no. He was the guy that, of course, we wanted the ball in his hands because he was an unbelievable ball handler, and he's an unbelievable free throw shooter, right? But when you look at what we were able to do, it was really about getting him just to slow down a little bit and embrace the moments that matter by becoming comfortable there with the play present scenario.
Mate, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was definitely, after listening to your podcast, your webinar with Rob on this topic, that was definitely one of the conversations the stories that I hope would come up. It shows the efficiency and the how elegant and simple a series of steps can be in a process, and the timing of it. is wonderful. And I'll just quickly cast back to my work, our work at the Northern Pride, where I stopped down to training one day, and the goal kicker was brought in for his goal kicking. And maybe he wasn't doing as well as maybe he was expected to do. And I worked with him for 20 minutes. We used the focus band, which tends to tell you, is your brain busy or is it nice and calm? And you can do it while you're doing push-ups or sit-ups or free throws. And I've got a free throw story for you as well. But all we did is we had him fixate his gaze on the ball and fixate his gaze between the sticks, obviously not the sticks, otherwise you're going to hit the sticks because this is rugby and he's kicking penalty shots and conversions. And he had a little Bluetooth speaker in his ear which played positive music when he was fixating his eyes and also when his mind was kind of calm and quiet. And we developed that routine where he could kick without thinking. And we could measure that without thinking. So that's what the biofeedback device was. And it's for me, it points to the fact that a lot of athletes are unconsciously competent, but then somehow they go back to conscious competence. And so they literally get, and I've done this plenty of times when I'm trying to hit a volleyball, I'll overthink it. Although I haven't got my skill level to that level of mastery just yet. So I'm still at that conscious competence level. But it was just a 15, 20 minute scenario. And he learned a process to use his breath and to focus. And when he was ready to kick. Now he kicked 81% that year, which is right up there in terms of anyone you're likely to see. And it's interesting. One of the times I was sitting at Barlow Park in the crowd and Khan was, sorry, there you go, Khan. The athlete was kicking for goal. And I know how long his routine takes. I generally know it takes a while, but he knows when it's time to kick. He goes through his process, not as long as Jason Day, the former #1, who's got 28 steps to his routine and takes forever, but still took a while. And, but he stood there and I was waiting for him, like, okay, it's about time for him to step in and start to kick, but he hadn't. And I went, oh, this is not his routine. And he ended up missing it. And I asked him about it later and he said, yeah, the wind blew up and it kind of distracted me. So it was interesting when he went with his routine, 4 out of 5 times he was converting, versus that time, just that one time when he went out of his routine. Obviously we didn't have the band on him that time. He didn't get the result. And the second thing is basketball related. I've never told you this, but I was working with a young under 18 basketballer in Cairns and he was doing free throws. And he had the focus band on. So he's shooting free throws and he's shooting in the no mind state. So he's in mushin, the Japanese word for no mind, and he's hitting free throws. And all I'm doing is I'm looking at the screen, at the screen of the computer where I can see the feedback and he can't see the feedback. And as he shoots, I either put my thumb up to say, I think it's going to go in, or I put my thumb down to say, I think it's going to miss. And when he was in motion, the no mind state, he was automatic. So it's thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. And I wasn't even seeing him shoot. I could just hear him shoot. And I had no idea if it was going in or not. But just based on his brain state, I was going, yes, it's in, and it would go in. And the one time I saw red, I instantly put my thumb down because, no, you're going to miss this. And he had missed it. And I'm like, what did you do? He says, oh, I started to think about my wrist position. I'm like, mate, there's no reason to be thinking you've got this on tap. You just need to let your body do what it needs to do. Don't interfere, and just shoot. So I always wanted to share that with you because I thought it was, I wish I got it on video because it was just like, wow, you actually picked it, Rob. You picked it when he was going to miss. And it was because he had tried to get try to control this incredible
there was a
body.
Change to his sequence of events, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. But if you look at, we're still on cognitive anchoring and a couple of these strategies. I think the big thing for us is, we talk about environment, and it's really important for us and all of the teams that I've been involved with, when they turn up to an event or a venue, all right, we're really encouraging them to gain some environmental sense. So if it's basketball, for example, our guys they'll go and do a court walk. All right, baseline, sideline, baseline, sideline. What's the lighting like? Where are the logos? Where's somewhere for you on both sides where you can take that moment with your fixated gaze. What is it going to be? So we'll do that to create that environmental sense for them to become comfortable in that particular environment. And I can give you an example. At 2008 Olympics with the Indonesian team and the track and field guys for Indonesia, there was one guy there who ended up running a 10:17 or 10:15 in the lead up, right? So he was footing it. And he's the fastest guy in Southeast Asia. Can't argue with that. However, during the Olympics in his heat, he ended up with Tyson going on one side and Usain Bolt on the other, right? So straight away, his environmental sense went from his lane, so reducing the noise, okay, to actually increasing the noise by going, oh, right. Those two guys went off, and we all know the unbelievable athlete that Usain Bolt is, and Tyson Gay he's up there as well. However, this athlete then finding him trying to run not his race, but their race, run a 10:45 or something or other, which was way off what we had hoped he was going to run, given the lead up to that. So really trying to reduce the noise, the environmental sense we find is really important. But quickly back on the cognitive anchoring, the fixated gaze. All right, everyone says, oh, where's that come from? It comes from aviation. All right, so with pilots, in part of their training, they will go through where they put them in a catastrophic position. So planes crashing. And what they did was they would then survey all of the athletes, all of the pilots, and go, the first thing that you did, we want you to take a fixated gaze at the manual, the operations manual, right? You've read it 1,000 times. Your basketballer has done that shot on the free throw line 1,000 times. The rugby league player, the goal kicker, he's gone through that position of his sweet spot, hitting the ball 1,000 times. So they've done it 1,000 times. So what's different? So they do the fixated gaze on them. Don't touch it, don't pick it up, but they look at the manual. That then brings them back and connects them to the here and now. Then they can go through the process of everything they need to do in order to, avert a catastrophic event. So funny enough, that's where the fixated gazing had first commenced. So thinking in aviation in that regard. So I think there are a couple of the strategies, Rob, that we use, and we feel that they're really quite beneficial in that regard, because ultimately our goal through any of these type of strategies is to really allow the athlete to develop performance flow, right? And when they're in that state, you can watch any athlete in any sport or anybody who's at the top of their game, whatever that situation is, whether that's sport, business, whatever. Okay, the best of the best make it look easy. The best of the best make it look like they have the one thing that all of us want when we are an athlete or we're trying to play sport, which is time. They just look like they have so much time to do things. You look at the best players or the best athletes, irrespective of sport. They just appear to have this uncanny ability to make it look like things are almost going in slow motion for them. And that ultimately is where we talk about these 5 1%ers, which make up our 7 1%ers, the first 5 being psychological strategies. Our goal is to assist the athlete to achieve performance flow where they feel so comfortable in an environment that they notice that they have this luxury of time. What would your comments be to that?
Oh, so much. The moment you started talking, I'm like, this is going to be a cut segment. This has to be shared. This is so that was a little bit of off thought. But in terms of that timelessness, that's one of those key states, those key aspects of any kind of flow state or a peak performance state where you feel you're senseless, selfless. So you kind of forget yourself, and it just happens. The elephant, the horse rides, and we just ride along with it. And sometimes the body is the horse, and we just manage it. Just let it do its thing, mate. It knows what it's doing. Don't try and control it. Help it out a little bit with a little bit of cognitive anchoring, but just let it do its thing because it knows what to do. And that timelessness where time can just go by or it can just go so slow. That's also one of those parts of that key state. And effortlessness is also one of those key parts when all those neurochemicals kick in. And the other one that's really, really interesting, STER or stir, is that richness. that when we are in the present, when we are fully recovered, and we'll talk about how recovery really makes a lot of this possible, because if you're underdone, this stuff doesn't tend to come online, or it's much harder. Not everyone's Michael Jordan hitting 37 points with a 39-degree fever or whatever it was. The richness that when you have time and when you're in that state, you see the patterns so much more clearly. And you, like Zidane talking about his World Cup winning kick, he saw it happening in his mind before it even happened. So how can you see it happening and then do it? Like, there's just so much time for that to happen. So for me, it stacks on to what is the purpose? Why are we doing this? And I think that's a really important thing that you've covered. What is the purpose of us developing negative reactiveness? So that we feel comfortable, so that we can perform comfortably and effortlessly and enjoyably. So it's one thing to go, oh, we're going to improve your this, or you're going to improve that. But how does it make us better? And then how does that then transfer to the end result, which is winning or PBing or just being proud of ourselves?
Absolutely. And I think that's that was interesting when we were asked to talk about the title of the book. All right. When Winning Matters. Everyone has this assumption that we're going to be talking about the key thing being winning. Okay. Scoreboard, winning championships, winning grand finals. And early on in the book, Bev and I talk about when winning matters most. It's not about championships. It's not about the scoreboard. It's about us being impactful in our jobs that is helping us fulfill the characteristics of making somebody better, holistically, a better person. You know, you go back to the whole mantra with the All Blacks, better people make better All Blacks, right? That whole scenario, and it is cliche, but it is so true. If you find athletes or people that enrich you to make you better as a person, they're the type of people I want to be around. And this goes back to the very beginning of our discussion when I first met Bevo. Within 48 hours, he had made the decision and convinced the board and the owners to go, we want to bring this person on in this role, which we hadn't budgeted for and we didn't have on our books, because we feel that the enrichment that's going to bring to our players and our staff is going to be of value. And I think that's the biggest thing, because I think a lot of the time, wrongly, up to a certain period of time recently, talking about psychology, talking about depression, talking about the struggles that go with, you're an elite athlete. You know what? You know what they do every day? All the male athletes that I deal with, you know what they do every day the same as me? They get out of bed and they put their pants on one leg at a time. Same. So person first, athlete second. My youth athletes, student first, athlete second. My master's athlete, okay? Somebody's grandma and grandpa first, athlete second. All right, so putting the person in the picture. And that's the thing with, Bevo's, philosophy for training is his first two keywords are athlete-centered. I want to make this an athlete-centered approach to enrich this person to make them better. And how can we assist them to do that? If we can make them better through study, if we can make them better with their finances, if we can make them better through education, if we can make them better through community work, that person is going to be enriched. And when you talk to these athletes that achieve this flow state, afterwards, they're telling you about this timelessness moment they've had. And they talk about it with such enrichment of how this felt, and you go back to Bruce Lee talking about his infamous "Be Water, my friend." All right. And if you haven't found that, everyone Google, YouTube, Bruce Lee, the infamous "Be Water, my friend," and you'll see what he's talking about. So I think for us, we've made that transition successfully, where we can be more open with athletes and really discuss why. And that's why for us, the top 5 were psychological related strategies to improve performance, or related to helping this person overall, collectively, cope better with situations that present. And that transcends not just sport, but everyday life. So I think that's really, really important in that regard. But like you said, we can do that. And given the stresses that athletes are already under, there is a psychological and a physiological cost to all the training and the competition and the stress that they're under. So recovery is important. And we talk a lot about Recovery 101. And we look at a particular pyramid, and the base of our pyramid is what we call, we really talk about a 90-10 scenario. 90%, which are our big rocks. So I want you to give me the 3 biggest rocks that's going to make up 90% of what you do, 30% each. And for us, we're talking about sleep, we're talking about nutrition and hydration, and we're talking about mindfulness and psychological well-being. So they're our big bricks. That's the foundation of what we do. And then I talk to all our athletes about the other 10%. Man, whatever makes you feel good. Okay, we will look at the science behind why you're doing what you're doing. But here's a series of our 1%ers, which we feel are beneficial to help across 4 key areas. So muscular recovery, neural recovery or nervous system recovery, substrate, so nutrition and energetic recovery, and then psychological recovery. They're the 4 key recovery pillars that we look at. We'll go and then look at the science and find what we feel are the most efficacious strategies based on science for each of those 4 areas. And then we'll say to an athlete, for psychology, here's 4 or 5 strategies which we think will assist your psychological recovery. And we'll do that for each one of those 4 pillars. Now I have a recovery bank of 20 strategies. Okay, because what we've got to realize is individually, and this is the key training principle across the board that quite often gets neglected, and that is of individualization. Talking about assisting an athlete with performance flow, talking about engaging an athlete with mindfulness, talking about, I would like to open up a dialogue with an athlete to tell me how uncomfortable they felt in that particular environment. A lot of athletes would find that really quite challenging, and it may not be suited to them. So unfortunately, there's going to be some athletes where this is just not for them. All right. And we're not saying we need to push this across everybody, but here's a series of strategies. Maybe just try this one and tell me how you felt. So I think that's the other key thing, thinking of the athlete as an individual and giving them some autonomy to go, out of these recovery strategies, I think this is one that I could see myself doing regularly. Because at the end of the day, Rob, as you know, we can have the most scientific, best program in the world. But if we can't engage an athlete to participate in it, man, screw it up, throw it away. It's not worth the piece of paper it's written on. So we need to be able to engage the athlete in these strategies.
Yeah, that links with a former NRL coach and the ABC broadcaster. His old mate's name's losing me now, but he talked at the AIS Performing Brain symposium a couple of years ago, and he talked about 3 keys to any kind. He was talking about using neurofeedback with athletes and himself, and just 3 E's: engaging, effective, and efficient. So it's got to gauge your attention and be engaging and be somewhat pleasant to do, maybe a little bit unpleasant, maybe a bit of a challenge, which is good. But it's also got to be effective. Like it's got to, pay the bills. It's got to, you've got to feel a difference or notice a difference or be able to show some bloody difference in something. Feeling is always better, but even perception, like the quietness of mind or something like that. And then efficient, like it needs to be time efficient. So get in there, get it done. And so, yeah. And the thing with what I love what you said there is giving people options to test things out and find out what works for them. Something similar. If you give that and then someone finds it to be rewarding, well, then it becomes autotelic. And that's just a fancy word of saying rewarding. You do it because you get enjoyment out of it. Now, I stopped doing some foam rolling and rad rolling and myofascial release for a while, and I came back to it recently, and I've just felt like a different human being. And I can wake up in the morning feeling like rubbish, but I'll get out the trigger point and get out the rad rollers, roll around, and I feel like it is rewarding instantly. Now, I'm sure long-term it's going to have lots of positive effect, but in that moment, I feel like 20 or 30% more calm, more awake. And so just being a prompt to, here are the categories, here's 4 or 5 things, you don't need a PhD in it. So I love the Recovery 101. Here are the reasons why. If you want to know why, sure, but knowing why deadlifting is good just doesn't do you anything. You got to do the deadlifts. So knowing that foam rolling is good, great, but knowing it doesn't help. I know that's obvious, and I know you know that. So knowledge is great, but being able to allow people the opportunity to try stuff out and buy in. Buy in is that big word that is so
huge,
crucial.
Man. That's huge. Like, as I said, you can have the best program in the world, but if no one's doing it, it's not going to be beneficial. I just want to piggyback, if I can, on a couple of your points, because I think you've raised some really important points just then with your comments. And one is, quite often I'll get asked, oh, why should I do this? And my instant response is, okay, is A going to be detrimental to performance? Is it going to be detrimental to health? No and no. I know, well, there's 2 good reasons why you should do it. All right, let's forget, don't be so scientific. Yes, we want to use the science. And as you mentioned, I've spent a significant portion of my time in an academic setting and debating and having healthy debates with academics around the science why foam rolling allows a reduction in neural activity and tone. But does that actually translate to me, and my passion being basketball, having guys jump higher? Well, maybe there's very limited evidence to say if I roll, I'm actually going to jump higher. So from an acute performance perspective on jumping, there may not be tremendous support for that. However, there is a significant amount of support that shows that my perception to pain is going to be improved. All right. My overall feeling of wellness is going to be improved.
Absolutely.
So for me, if I'm going, all right, if we're going to ask this athlete to do some triggering or rolfing or whatever we're going to do, if it's not detrimental to performance and it's not detrimental to health, well, you know what? I'd be inclined to go, okay, you try that. And you as the athlete, I'm not going to read the science right now, but you tell me how that made you feel. And if you feel that works for you, let's see how we can help you incorporate that as part of your daily routine and your habitual habits for what you're going to do. Then I'll look at the science and go, okay, why is this actually, this athlete's telling me this is working. Can we now find the underpinning mechanisms from a scientific perspective to support the use of what they're doing? Now, most recently, the example I can give you was I've recently started work with Basketball New Zealand with the women's national senior team, the Sky Sports Tall Ferns. So shout out to the girls over in Auckland. They are in camp at the moment. They have their showcase game Saturday night. Unfortunately, I was unable to get over there under the current restrictions that we have, but they've been training the house down. So back to Basketball New Zealand, one of the goals we had was to prepare a series of infographics, info-Gs. And we were able to prepare some info-Gs through our marketing maestro, Jono, who's helping us out with the book on recovery. And we placed these on the Basketball New Zealand Facebook page. And there was a really good dialogue of feedback from people asking questions. And one of the questions was, I'm not sure that what you've listed is heavily grounded in science that backs the support of its use from acute performance perspective. And I really enjoy that someone has taken the moment to have a look at it and then challenge why we're doing what we're doing. Because I think quite often it just gets taken that, oh, this person has said this, so it should be all good and I'm going to do it. So it did allow us to go back and, okay, now we're able to put together a response and say, hey, here's a whole series of reasons as to why this is not detrimental to performance, why it's not detrimental to health. And here's a significant ground of research that supports the use in either reducing perceptions of pain or improving perceptual feelings of wellness. And for me, the coach, at the end of the day, if I said to you as the coach, I'm going to get 10-year-old guys to do some strategy A, and they all tell me that it makes them feel better, right? And it makes them have a better level of clarity. And they're telling me their level because this is the other thing that's the key. Their level of preparedness in their mind is improved. Name me a coach that says, okay, I want you to stop doing that. Like, I don't think a coach would say that, right? So yes, we want to know that it is grounded in science, but we want to know importantly that it's not detrimental to performance and that it is beneficial in relation to their general health and well-being. And if I get a tick in both of those two columns, then I'd be inclined to go, okay, you try that athlete and then you tell me how that makes you feel. And if they're happy with it, I'm happy for them to try it.
Yeah, you've got self-motivated athletes, curious athletes, driven athletes. They're not happy with where they are because they want to be further, and they're looking for ways to improve. And
they're looking for the 1%ers.
Yeah. So the big one for me, and you've got it as the number 7, and yet it really does form the foundation, because if you're not getting this, you're missing out on gains from.
Look, it's undisputed. I think that's a very powerful term to use with any strategy that you're talking
undisputed
about.
Champion.
But we're going to say that it's undisputed if you are not conscious. And I can't think of one other activity or strategy that can have such an impact on your total health and well-being as sleep, right? And I remember when my son was born, okay, Mackay, give you a shout out, Blake. Hey, what time is it? You should still be in school, so I hope you're not skipping school today, buddy. When he was born in the lead up, everyone would say to me, oh, you better bank your sleep now. You better get some sleep now. And at the time, you don't realize how detrimental sleep disruption can actually be until I think you've had your first child. Like, I certainly didn't, provide enough relevance on how I was going to be adversely affected by having such significant sleep disruption throughout, let alone being an elite athlete that they're playing for their next contract. They're playing to keep food on the table. Every athlete that you talk to, irrespective, every athlete's banged up. They've got some type of injury that they're holding on to, that I'm playing through the pain, that badge of honor, right? And sleep is so detrimental to all of that. Whether we're looking at the psychological factors of trying to improve the flow of cerebrospinal fluid within the brain itself, for removing some of the byproducts from the brain itself, allowing us to fully go through our sleep cycles during the night where I'm not having interrupted sleep. From an endocrine perspective, with the hormonal responses that are associated with sleep, from just the physical freshness I feel from waking up when I've had a good night's sleep. Man, we could go on forever around the importance of sleep. And under the current environment, talking about the COVID situation, that is the one reoccurring theme that I've been seeing a lot in the athletes that I'm dealing with, is that how COVID has, and the change in our life and our lifestyle due to COVID. People losing their jobs, people under excessive stress and pressure, worrying about, am I going to catch COVID? The situations about borders closing, the whole myriad of the ways that COVID has affected our lives is being reported in the sleep surveys that we're doing with athletes from multiple sports. And the impact of sleep just on general health and wellness is overwhelming. I don't think anyone will dispute that at all.
So you've, and thank you. That's good to get that flag in the ground once more. Just put it there and keep singing that song and waving that flag. The importance of the sleep hygiene, or you might say sleep routine or environment, the process of sleep. And when our sleep is consistent, we tend to sleep better. We go to sleep faster. We have less disturbances. Obviously travel makes it very tough. So we can get into that if you'd like, for sure, because although some of us aren't really traveling that much, although I do wonder how the AFL teams are going to go at the moment with a lot of people going over to Brisbane, up to Queensland. So
shout out to Cairns. There's a couple of teams arriving in Cairns and going to be playing out at Kazales. So all the best to the boys arriving there.
Can't wait to see that. But how's that going to affect? Okay, old mate, he's from Collingwood and he goes home and he has his blender and he has his yogurt or he has his hot bath, and it's just like clockwork. Like, I know for me, I've got a pretty solid sleep routine. I know when it happens. This. 9 times out of 10 it works. Last night it didn't. And the important thing for me was I think I've learned, at least from what I've learned from insomniacs, is that if you're not sleeping, if you definitely aren't sleeping, get out of bed. Don't sit there and stress over it. Stay up, do something, wait until the sleepiness kicks back in, and then have another crack at it. Don't lay in bed and associate your bed. So, but for the most part, got a sleep routine. So does Jackie, my partner. But what happens when you're now in a room that is unfamiliar to you? It's a different bed, all sorts of things. So do you want to go into some sleep hygiene? I think that's because it's so important.
Yeah, look, and I guess that, once again, this was some of the research that initially we conducted at the Perth Wildcats early on in the piece. And what I learned in Perth was, if you're going to be an athlete and you're going to live in Perth, the one thing you need to be good at is traveling, irrespective of where you are. What we were able to do was we actually conducted some research for the Wildcats on 2 occasions when they flew to Sydney and slept at the same hotel. Key to that was we looked at just general markers of sleep within the group. We then provided some sleep education. They came back to the same hotel next time they played the Kings, and we looked at the effectiveness of the sleep education on actually having an impact on their overall sleep. Now, just something as simple as perceived sleep quality. How well did you sleep last night? The first time we went to that hotel in Sydney, we had 3 players who recorded poor sleep. We had 6 players who recorded normal sleep and 1 player that recorded great sleep. We conducted the education around sleep hygiene, and that was basically, what are the sleep strategies you can put in place? You know, your bedroom temperature, reducing the use of technology in bed, turning the clock away, having a cool shower before you retire, doing some diaphragmatic breathing, looking at the food consumption with caffeine and high sugar foods prior to retiring. So there was a variety of sleep strategies, ensuring that we had, as much darkness in the room, so blackout curtains if we could, or we actually taped the curtains to the edge. Not having the players' rooms near street light, those sort of things. So there's a variety of strategies we put in place. Same survey post, and we had 3 players pre that said they had poor sleep. Second time round, donut. No players reported poor sleep. We had those 3 actually then were in the great sleep, and then the 7 this time were in sleep no different to normal. But we had a change of 3 being from poor to now 3 reporting great sleep by looking at just a change in what we're doing with their strategy. So that was one thing. The other one, though, I really just want to touch on briefly revolves around just being familiar with the difference between alertness and consciousness when it comes to regaining sleep, or the impact of when I have a sleep interruption to what I do post-sleep interruption that is going to significantly affect my ability to regain sleep. And that sleep interruption deals with alertness. So if I'm talking about little light bulbs in my brain, every time I get a little alert, one of those light bulbs turns on. So I wake up in the middle of the night for whatever reason, I might need to go to the bathroom. So I turn my bed lamp on, boom, one alertness bulb has now gone off. I then look at my clock, boom, another alertness bulb's gone off. I get up, walk around to the bathroom, turn the light on, another alertness bulb's gone off. Come back, pick up my phone, just check out, see if anyone's replied to my tweets, another alertness bulb's gone off. I then look at the clock and I start doing backward math to see if I go to sleep now, how many more hours of sleep can I get before I have to? Now another alertness bulb's gone off. Now all of a sudden, my level of consciousness to alertness has changed. Now I'm alert, and the time it will now take me to regain sleep is going to be significantly affected. So it's going to take me longer to regain sleep. So my point is, I can do activities when I'm conscious with a fairly low level of alertness. And the one we get asked the most is, if I have to go to the bathroom during the night. Well, you can do that, but you don't need to turn on every light in the house. You don't need to look at your phone. You don't need to look at your clock, because that is going to significantly impact you. And the example I can give you really that talks around that. So we look at Texas Tech basketball team. They were in the March Madness in the lead up. They lost a game or two, and the captain went, okay, manager, of a night, we're on the road. I want you to go around with your little bag and you're going to collect every player's iPhone. No phones at night in the rooms when we're on the road. Okay, of course, some of the players kicked up a stink. They weren't very happy about that. However, what ended up happening was Texas Tech then went on, I think it was like a 13-1 run to make it through to the playoffs in March Madness. And they strongly attribute some of their success to improved sleep habits, just because they no longer had this social fixation to their mobile phone. And one of the guys, and the quote is, from one of the players, your phone will always be there. Your friends will always be there in the morning. Notifications and all that stuff are all going to be there tomorrow. Put your phone aside. So think about it. And there's been a bit of research lately that's coming out about the impact of blue light and different light impacts on the retina, and then the issues around artificial light and melatonin. And so there's a whole area there which is of interest. But I think the number one thing is to make your bed and your sleeping environment for one thing, and that is to go to sleep. Your bed is not the place to start playing with your phone. Your bed is not the place to pull out your laptop and, I'm going to watch 4 episodes on Netflix right now, right? If you want to do that, stay downstairs and do it. And then if you get a little bit of sleepiness occurring, great. Now you can go up and hop into bed and go to bed. Your thoughts on that, Rob?
Yeah. My partner's like, why are you showering in the dark? Well, because I don't want to turn my brain on. It's only a bit of light. Love to read a little bit lately. We've been reading the Tao of Pooh, which is a Taoism from a Winnie the Pooh perspective. And sometimes she'll fall asleep while I read, so that's been, and it's turned out to have a nice impact on us. So some kind of reading without the devices, and ever since I was actually really struggling with sleep for a little bit, and we just redesigned the room a little bit. We just moved the bed where we're getting far more fresh air. I wasn't looking towards the street light. Like I was always laying on my side, looking out the window, and there was always a lamp coming through. And I wanted to put something up on the window, and she's like, "No, I want to look out the window and see this beautiful environment that we live in." So I'm like, "Oh crap!" But yeah, just changing the room around, being more under the fan, getting more fresh air in. Very cold up here in Cairns. Sorry, everyone. At the moment, so it's great sleeping weather. So just some small little things, just keeping the, I think we hadn't clean sheets for a couple of weeks, and I had really poor sleep. So just, babe, sorry, I know she loves clean sheets. I'm cleaning the sheets tonight. And that night, boom, just so much. So even just things like simple, like constantly clean, keeping our area clean.
The whole hygiene thing, whether I'm talking about hand hygiene with COVID, I'm talking about sleep hygiene with sleep.
Yeah.
My thing is restless legs. Right? I am not a fan of tight sheets on my legs. So, and my partner's the same. I'll jump into bed and I'll make sure I rip my sheet off completely. Not off, but it's not tucked in.
No, me neither. Well, she loves that.
Shout out to all of the essential workers and the first responders. So my wife's a nurse and midwife.
Yeah.
So she makes the bed like a nurse makes a bed, man. And you stuff yourself in there and your feet are pretty tight at the bottom. I'm trying to kick them out. So I'm not a fan of tight things on my feet. If I find that I have something tight on my feet, that really affects my ability to fall asleep. So look, I think a lot of those strategies across the board, when you're talking about the 1%ers, and we've done a lot around the psychological aspects, but just the general recovery things around, as I said, the muscular, the neural, the substrate or energetic, and then the psychology side of things. I think everyone can sort of pull in one thing from there, which they may be able to resonate and go, that's something that I really think I can invest in myself in that in some way. Some of the apps always get asked about, is there any apps that are good? And I know we're talking about not being on your phone so much, but we use a lot. Smiling Mind is one app we use frequently with my youth athletes, which is a little bit of meditation, a little bit of a positive reaffirmation, and the athletes seem to like that somewhat. And I'm sure there's a load more others out there, but that's one that we've used more readily. So I think there's some value in those sort of things. But at the end of the day, it's about finding what works for you. Here's some strategies. Have a look at what works for you. If it's not detrimental to performance and it's not detrimental to your health, then I think we would have a look at how we can try and facilitate those with the athletes. But I encourage everyone, jump on the Facebook page, join the When Winning Matters group. We do lives on Saturday mornings at 10. We're unpacking the chapters. We've got 3 chapters to go. A couple of weeks left with our pre-release pricing for the book. And then the book will be out and about. So looking forward to getting it out and getting you a copy so you can have a read.
Yeah, I'm super keen to read it. And those just those 2 questions that you gave, I'd love to see if we could tee up Rob another time. Obviously, if you want your dose of Rob, well, you have you
get double dose of Rob.
Get your 2 bobs worth.
That's it.
Yeah, you and Rob have been prolific in sharing and going above and beyond what you would normally get from a book. So, just from you today, those two key questions, and it really comes down to that, like the medical oath of do no harm. So does it hurt and does it hinder? If it doesn't, then okay. So even if anyone takes anything, and I've definitely taken this away from right now, you may be pissing up against the wall or wasting your time or effort, but as long as you're not, really shooting yourself in the foot, or hopefully you're not. And I think with people like you out there and the other practitioners and researchers who do the science and do the practical application, who can offer wisdom, decades of wisdom from your experience, I just encourage people to get on and learn from you guys. Look up, especially your recovery research from 2011.
Yeah, there's the recovery checklist is actually on. We've put up a free version to be downloaded on the When Winning Matters Facebook page. So as soon as you join, so it's a private group only. Obviously, you need to join the group, and then you can hop in the Facebook page and download all that information. The other thing, just quickly, we have added to the book is on our website. SPB International. If you jump onto SPB International, we do have an MVP room. So when you purchase the book, inside out, you'll get access to the MVP room. In there, we have the 10 chapters listed with this whole series of bonus content. So we have slide decks, we have posters, we have questionnaires, we have actionable items. So every chapter is listed inside the MVP room, and we'll have a series of free downloadable content. And our goal, as we've said to our community in Facebook, is download that information and just put it up. Here's your actionable checklist. Get your athlete or your child to put it on the, on the fridge. Here's your visualization task for today. Put that on the fridge. So there's a whole series of those there that we really want to try and share that knowledge. If you follow us on any of the social platforms, you'll see we're always tagging, always learning and sharing knowledge, which we really like to try and do.
Yeah. And I think just to finish, Steve, I know we've had a great time together. Something that Rob said recently on was that you're educators and you're here to educate, and the comprehensiveness in the slide decks and multiple ways of learning by reading, by listening, by watching, by doing. It's just a multimodal educational approach. So if someone doesn't like listening, they can read. If someone doesn't like reading, they can listen. If someone likes to watch or do, there's something in it for everybody. So it's all great stuff. And keep on doing those 95 percenters, the basic stuffs as well. But man, can we really call sleep a 1 percenter? I think that's the 95 percenter. So
yeah, absolutely.
I might leave you with that. Yeah,
that's one of our big ones. Absolutely. All right, man. Hey, really appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity to talk shop, and look forward to providing any feedback or answering questions. If any of the community want to gain any more information, feel free.